Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It is me, Omar from Hardware, or it is us from Hardware, already early in the morning, 3:53 here in El Paso. But we are here to talk about awards and a preview of the week ahead, and it's already week 12, pretty bittersweet. It's FCS Judgment Weekend. I've got plenty of games on my list. I mean, the early part of the day for me will be all FCS games on the screen for the most part. But before we start, Jackson, how's everything going? I'm joined by my good friend, Jackson. How's everything going?
Everything's going good. Yeah, as you said, I can't believe it's already the last week for the FCS. This is traditionally a pretty weak slate for FBS. We have a couple of solid games that we'll talk about later. But yeah, no, it's been good. I just can't believe it's already here. So it feels like this season has flown by. So
Absolutely. And I mean, with that, I mean, later on in the year, we're at this point of the year when award show, or sorry, not awards, I guess position awards start coming with semifinalist lists. So that'll be the meat of our show as we talk about a defensive award that came out with a semifinalist list this week. But before we start, I mean, we have our HBCU players of the week. In mine, I don't think it should come to a surprise to anyone. My player of the week is Quentin Williams. I know I gave him some hype last week when talking about him opposite Davius Richard in the game of the week in Black College football. I mean, for all intents and purposes, with Howard versus North Carolina Central, and what a surprising result that was. I mean, I think everyone expected a competitive game, like no one was expecting. I'm not going to disrespect Howard and say that they were a pushover, but no one was expecting Howard to blow out North Carolina Central. And so, I mean, in that game though, I mean, Quentin Williams pretty much outdueled Davius Richard. Pretty much, I wouldn't say stole the headlines, but honestly showed why he is arguably the most pro-ready quarterback in Black college football like, right now, in my opinion. In my opinion, I mean, he's got everything you'd want. He's got size. He's 6'5", 205 pounds. He's accurate as a passer. I mean, he's not incredibly accurate, but I mean, 65% completion percentage last year and then 60% this year. But against North Carolina Central, he outdueled Davis Richard. He went 23 for 33, 277 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and he ran for a touchdown and had 15 rushing yards. And this win over North Carolina Central put Howard in the driver's seat for the Celebration Bowl. But with the way things are going, I would not bet them as a slam dunk this week against Morgan State. Because Morgan State has played a bunch of teams. They have some quality wins. They beat a 7-3 Richmond team. They almost beat Albany, who is 8-1 against FCS competition and won't be a seed, but will be hosting the first round, and it's in the CAA title mix. So they're a pretty solid team. I would not be surprised if Morgan State spoiled Howard's bid for their first ever Celebration Bowl appearance. But man, Quentin Williams did his part to put Howard in the driver's seat to see them on the third Saturday of December. And I mean, honestly, I will say this: the East West Shrine Bowl has a partnership with HBCUs. I think I got to see Quentin Williams play in the East West Shrine Bowl. I mean, I think he's that caliber of player that could be a late round draft pick because we saw. I mean, he reminds me. I guess I wouldn't say his style of play reminds me of this guy, but I say like his rise and ascent kind of reminds me of EJ Perry in the 2022 or 2023 East West Shrine game. A guy that can really sneak into the game, not sneak in the game, it's disrespectful, but play in the game as a late round quarterback prospect.
yeah, absolutely. And we talked about Howard like almost all year long, that game against Northwestern where they almost won. And Northwestern, considering their offseason circumstances, they haven't had a bad year. So that was an impressive showing. They've stayed competitive in a lot of games that they necessarily on paper shouldn't have. So and without Williams, they do not have that. You take away, I mean, this goes for a lot of very good quarterbacks, but you take away Williams and Howard's not the same style football team. So yeah, for my HBCU player of the week, I'm gonna go with Jada Byers, the running back from Virginia Union. Against Fayetteville State last week, he had 40 carries for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. This game was a little bit of a slugfest where it was going to be challenging for either team to come back if there were multiple scores. he really had the game sealing touchdown mid third quarter to put Virginia Union up 21-10, just because it was pretty clear that the Fayetteville State was not going to be able to recover offensively, at least. It was a 16-yard touchdown, most of those yards being after contact, which with it for a back that makes most of his money on elusiveness, it was impressive. So and he's been one of the best HBCU running backs all year, if not the best. Minimum 10 carries a game, 5 games with multiple touchdowns, including a receiving touchdown, which I like to see. So Jada Byers had a great year for Virginia Union, and hopefully they can keep him for next year, because it really seems like they gave him 40 carries. This offense revolves around Jada Byers, so hopefully they can keep him for next year.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, last year he had the staggering stats. He had 19 to 20 yards last year and 284 carries. He takes a really big workload for Virginia Union for such a small frame, 5'7", 185, which I think that's something the pro scouts will want to see, a guy that that has mileage on him, that can take those carries and get better as the game wears on. I mean, the 40 carry game against Fayetteville State, like that's impressive for him, and really just shows, I mean, just what a tough runner he is despite his
Yeah.
5'7", 185 frame. So um
And
it's
by the
crazy.
way, first Virginia Union CIAA championship also, which is awesome.
Yeah. And they play Kutztown or Kutztown. I don't know how those great people pronounce that city, but they play Kutztown in the first round of the playoffs this Saturday in Pennsylvania. They're 10-1. Kutztown is 9-2. So that's something to watch out for, him playing in the playoffs and kind of I would say, I guess, like extending his reputation. Yeah, extending his reputation against a school of that caliber. But yeah, Byers for sure. Hopefully he doesn't get I guess grabbed up by the transfer portal. But I mean, the Virginia Union offense, man, that's an old school offense that'll just run it down your throats. But yeah, that being said, just a great week. Multiple great performances we can talk about in Black college football. I also want to highlight we have a Division II HBCU bowl now, the Florida Beach Bowl, and Johnson C. Smith, the surprising Johnson C. Smith Bulls had a 5-game improvement, improved from 2-8 to 7-3, and appearing in the Florida Beach Bowl. They didn't win the CIAA, but they had a respectable season. So the Florida Beach Bowl invited them to play opposite Fort Valley State, who's one of the powers of the SEAC. And for Johnson C. Smith, Reggie Bryant and Jameer Cherry got two standouts. Reggie Bryant had 151 receiving yards for the Bulls. I mean, this year for the Bulls, I mean, he's had a solid year, 44 catches for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. So a couple players to watch out for Johnson C. Smith. And it's just a great year that they get to end their game with a bowl game, a trip to arguably the players you want to play for a national title, but playing a game in sunny Fort Lauderdale is definitely a great consolation, and arguably a better destination than playing a first round playoff game in Pennsylvania. No offense to great people at Kutztown.
Oh no, it absolutely is. Sunny Fort Lauderdale, as in this time of year is a lot better than being in PA for sure. So that is if that's my consolation. It's kind of like if you're not going to the best bowl game, you were hoping for something better, but then you get to go to the Bahamas Bowl. Did you really miss out on anything? No, you really won. So
You mean the famous Toastery Bowl?
sure.
That's what it's called. Yeah, the famous Toastery Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Although my favorite sponsorship at the Bahamas Bowl has been definitely Popeyes, when they had I think it was like the first like 1,000 fans to get there got like a free like box or free Popeyes meal, and they whatever the number was, they did not have that number of people show up to the game, which I just thought was hilarious. So they were giving out two. So hopefully if you went to the Bahamas Bowl a few years ago, you went hungry. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that being said, Jackson, I'll let you take the lead on our award and just see what direction you go, because we split the research in half with the watch list. So, I'll let you take the lead and direction on our Butkus Award discussion.
yeah, absolutely. So we are talking about the Dick Butkus Award, obviously, which goes to there's a very unique verbiage to describe the award, in my opinion, at least. It goes to the most impactful linebacker in the game, not the best, which I think is an interesting distinction. I would point to previous winner of the Butkus Award, Luke Kuechly, as maybe like a player that's very impactful. Even if there were guys that were more talented around him and all that, Luke Kuechly was always one of the most powerful and one of the most impactful players on the field. So we're going to be talking about it from that perspective, hopefully. So yeah, the semifinalist list came out just a few days ago, actually. And there were 12 in total, I believe. So Omar and I will be alternating players and just kind of talking about them. I don't know what kind of like research you did on all your guys. For some of these guys, there's only so much like all 22 available. So I watched what was available, or as much as I could at least. Went over some PFF stats, watch some highlight tapes, all that too. So yeah, it'll be a good time. We'll be talking about a lot of these linebackers. There were no group of 5 guys. And the vast majority of these players come from ranked teams. So if there are any biases, hopefully we can like address that. But yeah, we'll just start going through these.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's interesting to note that distinction of the most impactful linebacker in the country because a lot of these guys' stats they don't jump off the page. I mean, of course, there's ways that linebackers can take attention from, um, I guess, from the offense and free up ways, or I guess, yeah, free up ways for their other players or other defensive cohorts to make plays for sure. I mean, you mentioned this year no group of 5 winners. There has not been a group of 5 winners since, well, ever actually in the Butkus Award. I know it's surprising to say because Zaven Collins took home, a pretty fair share of awards back in 2020 for Tulsa. But there's never been a group of 5 winners. So this is an award. This is a very Power Five heavy award for sure. I mean, Collins took home the Bednarik Award, the Nagurski Trophy, and the Lombardi Award. So this year is not the year for a group of 5 winner, but we could always have one in the future. Hopefully perceptions do change. So going on to the award, I mean, just doing some research. I mean, the first guy I looked at was Tommy Eichenberg of Ohio State. And he's a guy with 75 tackles. But I think for me with this one, I think for him, like the main argument, I guess, that works against him is Ohio State is such an offensive centered team where I mean, Eichenberg isn't a household name to many general fans. I'm not sure if he is to, I mean, I guess to many writers, but I mean, still having a solid year, 75 tackles. And I mean, Ohio State has had some signature defensive performances for sure. You look at the Penn State game, you look at the Notre Dame game as well, where they, held Notre Dame to, I think was it 14 points? Yeah, 14 points. And then, of course, they stopped Notre Dame with enough time for the offense to step forward, I guess to make that last minute drive. So Eichenberg is a strong candidate with 75 tackles. Not much TFLs compared to the rest of the candidates that I covered, but I'm not sure that really matters with this award because as a linebacker, like TFLs are a great stat. But I mean, like the award says, you want to be the most impactful linebacker. So Eichenberg is a solid candidate, 75 tackles, but really a quarterback of a solid defense that gets overshadowed by the offensive exploits of Travion Henderson, Kyle McCord, and of course Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you're a solid player and you're from a lot of these awards, right? The people who, and we've talked about it a lot before, the people who vote on these awards are often coincide with the people who are going to be ranking a lot of a lot of these schools. And who are they watching if they're watching for rankings? They're not watching some of the best linebackers from a 4-8, or at this point in the season, 4-6, group of 5 school. They're going to be watching Ohio State and Alabama, like my first guy and all that. So, and understandably so, all of us can't, watch all the films from every school, but it's just unfortunately one of the downsides of the awards portion at least. So, for my first player, I'm going to go with Deontay Lawson. He's a middle linebacker from Alabama. as good of a pass rusher at middle linebacker as you'll see. The only game that I really have access to for the film for was against Texas this year. It was his second highest graded Power 5 game of the year, so he did play well. I do my best to not put too much weight on pure stats or PFF grades or blue blood brands and scout the player, not the laundry with a lot of these. One thing that was interesting, he is the 341st rated PFF linebacker, which is just like low for someone that you would see on the semifinalist list. So he is the second highest pass rushing grade of any linebackers. So he kind of makes up for a lot of things there as far as disrupting, and you could say impactful. But he's definitely not a coverage guy. Like he is best when the play is in front of him and he is either rushing the quarterback or he is stopping the run. There were a few times in zone coverage where you could accuse him of lacking awareness as far as where he was and his spatial awareness in a lot of circumstances. Not to say Deontay Lawson is a bad linebacker, just we know where his skill set is and where he's best, since when the play is in front of him, he's not flat-footed, he's approaching something, right? So Deontay Lawson, first player, and hopefully I think they have Chattanooga this week. Probably not going to see much of Deontay Lawson this week, but they do play Auburn for the Iron Bowl. So hopefully get to see a little bit of him there.
Yeah, exactly. Don't sell Furman short because Furman's a top 5 team in the FCS. So, I mean, the voters will be dismissing them, but I just want to put that out where this could be a test for Alabama. It could be something like I think the 2018 or 2019 game against Citadel, where Alabama finds itself down at halftime before, Nick Saban, does his Nick Saban halftime adjustments thing and gets the troops going and everything for Alabama. So just wanted to say that about Furman. No push over there. And not a team that you'd want as a warm-up game before the rivalry, before the Iron Bowl. But I think they'll take care of Furman. It just depends on like how long Furman hangs around, because the Paladins are gonna hang around. Um, that being said, going on to my guy, speaking of Alabama, we have the next linebacker that I covered was Jalen Ford of Texas, who, of course, Texas beat Alabama, and that could become a discussion topic come the college football playoff. But Ford's stats are a little bit better than Eichenberg's as the year goes. I mean, identical in tackles, 74, but the 10 TFLs are where he sets himself apart. And when I look at impactful linebackers, this is like what I think of. I think of like big games where I want to say Ford's impact kind of stretched beyond the box score, because you look at the box score against Alabama when they upset the Crimson Tide on the road. Ford only had 5 tackles. But if you look at what that defense as a whole did, of course, we think the linebacker being the quarterback of the defense, I mean, it really a great game. I mean, stymieing and flustering, a then unseasoned Jalen Milroe. I mean, they sacked Milroe 5 times. Milroe only had 34 net rushing yards because, of course, sacks are taken away from rushing yard, or yeah, sacks are taken away from rushing yards. But I mean, when I think about the award and like impact on most impactful linebacker, I gotta say that Jalen Ford was a distraction that game and really helped the defense fluster a young Jalen Milroe, and really helped like that game is one of the games that has the most impact, one of the most impactful games of this college football season, of this playoff race. So I mean, Jalen Ford is worthy of his of this award, or this award candidacy, especially with the explosive offenses of the Big 12. And it's to a lesser degree this year, but Oklahoma's got a great offense. Kansas has a very solid offense as well. So Jalen Ford is deserving of this. It has a strong case for it too, just through the Alabama game.
Absolutely. Anytime that you can go on the road, like a place like Alabama, at that point in the season too, where hopes are high, and play like that is impressive and deserves a lot of recognition, because that is, talk about impactful. That's probably the most impactful game we've had all year. So that is yeah, absolutely. For my next guy, or for my next semifinalist, Maris Lefau, the weak side linebacker from Notre Dame. Watched his all 22 versus Ohio State this year. A really nice sidestep, and really evasive when rushing the passer, and gets creative with that. He has some really good lateral speed too, where they're able to put him as the spy on whatever quarterback they're facing, and able to just fly across the field if there is. He made one. I don't think he ended up getting credited with the tackle, but he did. He definitely impacted the play, where it was almost a little like quick screen, or like a quick flat route, to outside the numbers, and he just like flew across the field, and impacted the play. So, um, he also shows a lot of great improvisation where he disrupts the play. There was a terrific buzz coverage where he was supposed to blitz, started blitzing, and then he read there was gonna be like a quick slant to the right, and he just dropped back right away, and ended up making the tackle. He didn't get there in time to get the PBU, but just a lot of awareness, and he can be a hard hitter. It's hard to be a bad linebacker when you have that kind of awareness and you have the physicality. So Maris has played very well this year. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the film analysis. I mean, our styles like counter each other because, of course, I'm the writer and you being the film guy, but Maris the foul, like it's just kind of sad with Notre Dame's season how it's just kind of been overshadowed. I mean, Notre Dame once again is not in the New Year's Six race. They're probably going to find themselves in the ReliaQuest Bowl, just with other things happening around them in college football, particularly with the Big Ten landing a spot in the Orange Bowl, and all likelihood, excuse me. But Maris Leafau is falling along a great line of Notre Dame linebackers. Excuse me, like I think like Jalen Smith, right, for the Fighting Irish start a few years back. Of course, everyone knows about Manti Te'o. So just like a strong pedigree of Notre Dame linebackers very recently. And I mean, it fits too that Maris Leafau is leading this defense because Marcus Freeman was a tough linebacker himself, a great linebacker himself for Ohio State in his younger days. So very fitting. I mean, definitely a bright spot for this Notre Dame team, and really like not the player we'd probably expect to talk about the most on this team. I mean, when it comes to awards, probably came into the year talking about, think we're going to talk about Sam Hartman for the Heisman. Began the year talking about Audric Estime as well. I mean, so definitely a bright spot for the Fighting Irish with everything that's happened. And, you know, I mean, they still have a chance for a very strong year. Going on to on the next player that I looked at, I had Cedric Gray. Looked at Gray for North Carolina, and this was surprising for me to see. I mean, he's having a strong year as well, but in terms of impact, like you want to like when you think about North Carolina, you think about the offenses that the Tar Heels have put out since Mac Brown's been there, whether it be Sam Howell, the last few years putting up stats. But in this case, I mean, Drake May, of course, this year leading the Tar Heels. But I mean, you look at Cedric Gray, and this is a guy whose impact is seen in the box score for sure. I mean, he's a guy that, really forces teams to put attention on him, as all these players do. But I mean, you look at some of these tackle totals: 14 versus App State, 14 versus Georgia State. Or sorry, that's last year's stats. Jeez, I'm stuck in the past. I purposely clicked 2023. But this year as well, you look at 18 tackles in a losing effort versus UVA. You look at 11 tackles versus Duke. He had 3 tackles for loss for 38 yards against Campbell. Just like I know it's Campbell, it's an FCS school, but 38 yards worth of tackles for loss is an absolutely staggering number. That's like I didn't watch that game, so I don't know which play was the chunk tackle for loss, but just you look at those stats in the box score. I mean, like 38 yards versus tackles for loss are drive changing numbers. Like it's hard to recover a drive from that alone. So Gray doesn't really get as much attention because of that North Carolina offense, and doesn't really get the Tar Heels have kind of, I guess, lost their luster in the national scale because of what's happening their season lately. But I mean, Gray is more than worthy. He is 6'2", 235. He's got good size for a linebacker, good speed as well. But yeah, and I mean, yeah, so I guess looking at Gray, he had 2 sacks for 32 yards. So it's probably a scramble gone wrong that increased that. But he's got 2 forced fumbles on the year as well. I'm not sure if we talked about much forced fumbles, but turnovers absolutely extend your impact to the game. So, Cedric Gray, worthy candidate, kind of I'd say a dark horse too, given the national perception of the ACC and especially of North Carolina lately.
Definitely. I've got an ACC player that I'm going to talk about a little bit later too that I'm a big fan of. So, but also possibly in the state of North Carolina. So you can probably figure out who it is if you watch linebackers this year. But for my next player, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the middle linebacker from Clemson. Watched the film of him against Florida State this year. Unfortunately, the Hollywood script writers were on strike and they did not have a terrific comeback. But he has a style of play it's easy to love for a linebacker, just relentless pursuit. Um, uh, Hastily chosen angles of attack can be his bane, where sometimes he does miss some from that. But man, it's that same hastiness that is the reason that he makes a lot of plays they necessarily shouldn't. So Jeremiah Trotter, watch some highlights of him. Really fun to watch. Just flies to the ball, aggressive, just a very, very like everything you want in a linebacker, even if not all the stats are there, he is just an effort player first and foremost. And that's something that you need at the core of your defense. And the core of your defense is a middle linebacker. Even if edge rusher is most of the time more important, you need your middle linebacker to typically be the leader of communication. So Jeremiah Trotter.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, of course, like the name, right? If you're a seasoned NFL fan, you know the name Jeremiah Trotter. So it helps to have, that pedigree for a guy like him. My
Yeah, it
next
doesn't
guy,
hurt. Doesn't hurt.
yeah, it doesn't hurt at all. Yeah, it doesn't hurt at all. So like my next guy, I think this guy is the favorite for the award in my humble opinion. I mean, it's Jay Higgins of Iowa. I mean, last year Jack Campbell won the award for Iowa. Jack Campbell took home a bunch of hardware for the Hawkeyes, for a Hawkeyes defense that really the offense took, and they're still taking they're still the butt of a lot of jokes this year. But I mean, if you look at impactful, I don't know what more, I guess how much more impactful you can be than being a linebacker for the Iowa Hawkeyes, because that defense is amazing. They're allowing 12 points per game. And if you look at some of those defensive performances, some of those moments in time where they had to take the game in their own hands, like the first game that comes to mind is a Wrigley Field game against Northwestern, where I mean Northwestern left points on the field in a 17-point game. You cannot leave points on the field. But Northwestern was stopped on fourth and goal. They had three or four chances from the one. I'm not sure if they started with the ball on the one that set of downs or moved the ball down to the 1 yard line, but they were stopped at the 1 yard line in a 10-7 game. And I think about moments like that where the Iowa defense has risen to occasion to, I mean, to either keep the Hawkeyes in the game, or I mean, honestly, just take the game in their own hands and win the game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I mean, and his stats to back it up. Like if it weren't just for being impactful, being an Iowa Hawkeyes, being the quarterback of the Iowa Hawkeyes defense, Higgins has 121 tackles 2 games to go. 140 tackles is certainly in reach. He's going to play in the Big Ten title game. Um, I'm not sure. I guess these awards are voted on during championship weekend. So the game against, either Ohio State or Michigan and Indianapolis would be a non-factor. But I mean, 2 games ago, 140 tackles and being on a defense of arguably the best defense in the country, the most important defense in the country. I think Higgins is going to run away with the Butkus Award, to be honest with you. So, following a great line of Iowa linebackers from as far as I can remember, Chad Greenway back in the day, right? That's the first great Iowa linebacker that comes to mind for me. Like Chad Greenway, Jack Campbell, of course. So just a long, long line of great Iowa linebackers.
So you're calling it right now? You think we have a winner?
I mean, yeah, like I think so. If the award looks at impactful, he's got stats that work in his favor, and as like literally like the Iowa defense is like they they are the heart and soul of that team, and they win a lot of games for that team. So absolutely, I think Jay Higgins is going to run away with the Butkus Award.
That's coincidentally, I think I have the winner of the award, or at least who should be on my guys I'm covering. So we'll we'll talk about that in a little bit. For my next player, I have a Washington linebacker, Edufuwan Ulofosio. I did my best to pronunciate that. I know that's the proper one, just probably didn't say it as smoothly. But man, Adafuwan has a great story. Played at what was the #1 ranked high school in the nation by USA Today, at least. And he walked on to Washington. Then he missed 14 total games with injury between 2021 and 2022. Man, he's just been one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful player on Washington's defense. Been one of the highest graded Power Five linebackers all year. And he's very well rounded in run and run defense and pass coverage as a pass rusher. Like he's just uh been everything for Washington for a good chunk of the year. In a good way, and I mean this as a compliment, his stock seems to have been the least affected by being on a top team where he hasn't necessarily been given the same courtesy or bias, depending on how you look at it, as some of these other guys that are coming from top teams. But man, this is probably Edifuwan is probably the most like deserving linebacker from a top 6 team. I forget exactly what Washington's ranked right now, but the new ones came out last night. But yeah, he's probably the most like deserving top team linebacker in my opinion. So
Yeah, I mean that makes sense honestly. And like for me, the one thing that makes me kind of hesitant is like Washington's performances against I guess or yeah, their performances on defense against like other top teams. Where I mean Oregon put up a bunch of points on them, but I guess they held strong enough to beat the Oregon Ducks. The USC, of course, dropped 42 on Washington. And the list goes on, but for sure, like being a playoff front runner, I think Washington is third in the playoff now. I think they swapped Washington out, Washington at 3, and put Florida State at 6. I think with the next playoff rankings. I was still working when the rankings got released, just being out here in the Mountain Time Zone. But I mean, yeah, for Washington, it's just great to see guys on this list where offenses usually are, the attention stealers on these teams, which like, the casual college football fan needs no introduction to Michael Penix, but for a guy like Olafosio, like yeah, like it takes more than a casual fan to know. So it's just good to see that. My next guy or my last guy that I had divvied out to me was Tyron Harper. Is it Tyron or Tyrone Jackson? Because you're more familiar with the pronunciation with him being a former Florida player. So I wasn't sure it was
I've
Tyron or
heard
Tyrone.
both. Tyrone is how most of everyone calls it. I believe it's Tyrone, but honestly, it's been a minute since I've heard the name, so I need a refresher myself. But
Yeah. So Tyrone Harper, 55 tackles, 6 tackles for loss for Missouri. And I think this is a great pick. I mean, if you want to look at I guess, impactful players on um, really great stories this year, because Missouri looks destined for a New Year's Six bid if they win out. They're at #9 in the country. They're not going to play in the SEC title game, so they don't have to worry about getting blown out by Alabama during the last week of the season. So I mean, just a great year. This is another player where you think impactful, and you have to look beyond the box score for a guy like Harper, where you look at just tough performances throughout the year, whether it be against like South Carolina. You look at the game against Tennessee as well. I mean, Tennessee is a huge one where they held that great offense, to 7 points. The Vols to 7 points in Joe Milton in a game that everyone thought was going to be a lot closer. It was gonna be honestly, for all intents and purposes, a dogfight. But I mean, Harper, 55 tackles. He is the leading tackler surprisingly of that defense, which shows that there's not much gap, I think, between like the best players in the team. So it looks like he's a guy that makes everyone around him better, where he's not the guy that's having to make the play. So I mean, I think that aspect kind of helps with the whole impactful aspect of the award. But I mean, I still think that Jay Higgins is the favorite, but Hopper for sure. Like, if you want to talk about a guy to put a face to for one of college football's best stories this year, or FBS football's best stories, this is definitely a guy that you put a face to for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what he did and his years at Florida in the Mullen era, and obviously it's tough whenever you have a guy like that transfer to a division. I'm not going to call Missouri a rival, but an interdivision opponent. But yeah, Hopper's been fun to watch for a while. So for my next guy, or I'll go with my last two guys at least. Nathaniel Watson, a middle linebacker from Mississippi State, 337 career tackles, which is just insane to me. It just speaks to his consistent production. I always look at for linebackers how you play in big games. Double digit tackles versus LSU and Alabama, which is really all you need to say. Like just flies to the ball, constantly productive, been that way for a long time. So Nathaniel Watson has been solid for a very long time. And my last guy, who I think is going to be the winner, Peyton Willis, the linebacker from North Carolina State, 6'4", 238, probably the best coverage linebacker that we've talked about today. He's battled a lot of injuries over his career, and now he's the ACC's leader in tackles and has the most tackles of anyone we've talked about today. So he's definitely a bull rusher as far as pass rushing goes, where he plants his hands, drives his feet, consistently gets some type of pressure. He clocked in at 23.7 miles per hour earlier this year, which is insane for a linebacker. For perspective, from week 10 in the NFL, that would be the fastest ball carrier of the week, which is Rashid Shaheed was at 21 miles an hour, was the fastest, which is insane. So he also probably has the best campaign poster for this award. The Tackles Tour by Peyton Willis is a graphic that that NC State put out. It's just him in a Taylor Swift style graphic in front of a bunch of highlight pictures in different shades. So Peyton Wilson, that's who I would go as the winner. Definitely the most productive, great leader. So we'll see.
I mean, yeah, it's the linebacker position evolved, and speed is now a more cherished, a more valued trait than, absolutely like
That
in
that
terms of
line
intent,
between strong safety and linebacker is getting blurred more and more. So
which I don't think anyone would have ever thought that, to be honest with you. That would have been the case. But yeah, like I could not agree more. That all these guys are just great candidates for the award. I want to see more group of five representation naturally. But what can you say? So going on to our games of the week. I mean, this week is FCS Judgment Week, and I'm excited for just the scenarios that are going to play out. Like, yes, you have your normal set of scenarios with like Missouri Valley Conference teams that are trying to build their resumes, and there are teams with rooting interests. Like North Carolina Central is going to want to be rooting. I think when I wrote in my guide, I forgot exactly what I put they should root for, but there's just so many great FCS games and a couple winner take all games, this weekend up for playoff spots. The first game that I want to talk about is Merrimack versus Duquesne out there in the Northeast Conference. And now we've talked about Neck at Night a couple of times. I've written previews for Neck at Night, Northeast Conference at night on CBS Sports Network, those Thursday night games. Merrimack's a team that didn't have an appearance in one of those games, and neither did Duquesne. But after Duquesne looked like they were running away with the Northeast Conference, but Stonehill, the second year FCS school out in Massachusetts that plays at WB Mason Stadium, aka what I call the paper stack, upset the Dukes. So now we have a winner take all game where both Merrimack and Duquesne have one conference loss. Merrimack's a team that competes very well. Like this is a team that I think if they don't make playoffs this year, then in the next 2 years they will be a playoff team because they rise to the occasion. I mean, they've been competitive with Holy Cross the past 2 years, even beating Holy Cross in 2021 when they beat UConn, when Holy Cross beat UConn that year. They're competitive against Holy Cross this year, 42-20. But I mean, this is a program that is just on its way up. They recently moved up to FCS, I think in like 2019 or so, or after the 2020 season. I think it was 2019 they moved up. So young FCS team. And they play tough defense. I mean, there is nothing else to say, but they play tough defense. They allow just 21 points per game. This is an old fashioned club. They only have I think 70 completions. They have less than 80 completions on the year. They don't run triple option. They average 123 yards per game, but they're just the strength of their offense is Tyvon Edwards, who has 1,085 yards and 8 touchdowns. He is an absolute workhorse, and the Merrimack Warriors are going to be depending on him. This is just a change of contrast. It's a change of styles in the past couple years because you think like 2021, you had Weston Elliott gunslinging the ball for the Warriors, had over 30 touchdowns. over 10 picks as well, just like a true gunslinger. And like now you have them averaging less than 10 completions a game. So Tyvon Edwards is honestly a Walter Payton candidate. I do think he'll get votes. He won't get that many, but he will get some votes for sure, especially if he has a strong game in this winner take all game against Duquesne. On the other hand, Duquesne couldn't be any more different. I mean, they have a gunslinging quarterback in Darius Parantes, who has 2,073 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 17 picks. So Duquesne likes to let Darius Parantes sling the ball around. And it's fun to watch, whether you're a fan of Duquesne or who they're playing against, because the interception total is kind of high. But I mean, if you're a casual fan like me, you will have fun watching Darius Parantes. And his favorite target is DJ Powell, who has 31 catches and 8 touchdowns and over 20 yards per catch. A legitimate deep threat, one of the best in the FCS. But Merrimack, if they win, this will be their first playoff appearance. And I can't think of a better story than that. Something that warms my heart more than teams getting their first playoff appearance.
No, absolutely. I will go for my first game of the week to watch Utah at Arizona. At the beginning of the year, I don't think anyone thought that these teams would be ranked 3 spots apart. The Utes have dropped 2 of the last 3, so it's been not a very good streak for Utah. The shame about this game is that it's on the Pac-12 network, but Pac-12 network is going out with a bang. I think they have this game, and then they have a Notre Dame game next week, which I saw that you tweeted about. So Jonah Coleman is a running back from Arizona that's been solid for most of the year, especially in Arizona's recent resurgence. We'll see if he can make like a dent on this Utah defense that frankly Oregon just broke. Like they were elite for the vast majority of the year, and then Oregon just came in and destroyed Utah at home and dismantled them like we haven't seen anyone do and on the road at Utah in a very long time. And it's just they have not been the same since. So I think we'll learn a lot about both teams. Arizona could be a team that's kind of like Duke earlier in the year, where it's a fun story because they're traditionally not a very good football team, and so it's fun to pull for their for a lot of their victories. Or we could find out that they're not the real deal at all. So I think we'll learn a lot about both teams. Probably more about Utah than Arizona, just because, like I said, I want to see how they handle some of this adversity. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, this is a surprising game because a lot of people, including myself, wrote Arizona off, but I think they just had some unfortunate losses for sure. I mean, they almost beat they almost beat Arizona, or sorry, almost beat USC at home in overtime. Questionable call for not going for two and going for the upset, which at the time looked like an upset, but it's just a regular, game at this point. Had Arizona won, but just shows how deep the Pac-12 is. I guess not how deep, kind of how top heavy the Pac-12 is, because the Pac-12 only will have looks like it'll have only 7 bowl teams, when in past years they've had 8, 9 bowl teams. There's just been plenty of depth. But I mean, among the top, like the top is there, I should say there is a small gap between the bowl eligible teams and a large gap between the bowl eligible teams and the 5 teams that likely won't make bowls, I guess, if there's a way to put it. So Arizona shows that. Um, yeah, Arizona shows that gap, that I guess lack of a gap. Going on to my next game, this is another FCS game with playoff implications. This one is a win and in game for the Drake Bulldogs, and the Drake Bulldogs, they have played strong defense for. I mean, I think back all the way back to 2020 when we started talking about FCS more intently the spring season, where their defense was just amazing in the Pioneer Football League. This year is no different. They allowed 24 points per game. But if you take away a 70-7 loss to definitely the best team in the FCS, a team that will looks like it's going to run through the FCS playoff field in South Dakota State, you take away that 70-7 loss, the average goes down to 18.8 games. You take away a 55-7 loss to North Dakota, another team that has a strong resume that blew out North Dakota State in the Fargo Dome. They're only allowing 14.4 points per game if you take away those 2 results over really amazing competition, and even more so when you look at the fact that Drake is a non-scholarship school where they are truly overmatched in those games. Their defense is elite. Excuse me, Finn Claypool, didn't expect that to be a tongue twister. Finn Claypool is Buck Buchanan candidate. I mean, and just looking at his stats, like, there is no shortage of amazing pass rushers in the FCS. I know we talked about Eric O'Neill just really setting the world on fire for Long Island. I know last week we showcased Lafayette's great pass rush. Um, Claypool is no different. 16.5 TFLs, 10 and a half sacks. He's gonna have his hands full with Butler though, because Butler has one of the best running backs in the FCS. Another Buck Buchanan, or sorry, another Walter Payton Award candidate at the running back position, in my opinion. We got Jaron Mitchell, who has 1,283 rush yards. He has also 3 receiving touchdowns and 183 yards. He's also 3 for 3 passing for the Bulldogs too. So I mean, this is going to be a great game. Butler themselves allows just 18 points per game on defense. So this is going to, and not only that, they played Montana earlier this year, and it didn't go in the usual fashion when it comes to a Pioneer Football League teams playing these highly ranked teams, because Montana's in the top 5, but Butler only lost by 15. Butler was very competitive on the road at Washington Grizzly Stadium. I mean, very competitive in a 35-20 loss in the altitude too, mind you. So man, this is going to be a slugfest. These two teams are longtime rivals in the Midwest in the PFL, and I hope Drake comes out on top, because this will be their first playoff appearance. But man, like this is it doesn't get better than this when it comes to the final week in FCS football. Just like two great defenses, one team looking for their first playoff appearance, and a rival trying to spoil a season does not get better than this.
I have another win in end game as my second game of the week to watch. Call me a sucker for mainstream FCS football, but the Brawl of the Wild, Montana State at Montana. Like I said, this is truly a winner take all game where the winner gets the outright Big Sky title and an automatic FCS playoff bid. So, if only game day had waited 1 year, this would be the perfect year to go to the Brawl. As cool as it is that they're going back to James Madison, this is really a much more consequential game than last year's rendition where they went to Montana State for the game. So I'm very excited for it. Definitely one of the main games to keep an eye on this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as much a win at an in game, but there are definitely seeding implications. I do expect both teams to get a seed per se, where they have the first round bye, they have home field advantage in the first round, and just depending on your seed, you have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But man, like yeah, the Brawl of the Wild, especially the Big Sky. I mean, the Big Sky, they have arguably the best crop of teams, the best crop of elite teams. I guess like the best, I guess, how can I put it? The best teams in the top of their conference. The top of their conference is arguably the best. Like the Missouri Valley Conference is having a down year, where I mean it's South Dakota State and really everyone else, if we're being completely honest. Even North Dakota State's having a down year. But you look at the Big Sky. I mean, Sacramento State is a great team. Montana State, of course, Montana having great years. Montana's having a bounce back year after just merely being a playoff team last year. Idaho has kind of reached their ascent as a program, and they're also a top 5 team that almost beat 2 FCS teams this year. So like the top of the Big Sky is just absolutely amazing, filled with depth. So I mean that the Brawl of the Wild has never, I mean, I won't say it's never meant more, but it is always a big game. It is always it's almost reached the point where it's a national game too, where the eyes of the country just ascend onto Montana. Going on to my last game of the week, or sorry, no, I guess I shouldn't say last game of the week, but because I do want to showcase the Celebration Bowl race a little bit. We got Harvard versus Yale, and there's a lot of historical implications here. I know Harvard clinched a share of the Ivy League title last week against Penn with a little bit of the Harvard special, the Cambridge special, out in triple overtime, which a lot of great overtime games. Princeton and Yale went to triple overtime in ESPNU and got more viewers than UTSA versus Rice. Just want to throw that out there. No offense to UTSA or Rice fans. Rice fans probably don't care. They probably don't care. But Harvard, Yale. So Harvard has a chance. Harvard and Yale have the chance to be the first champion/co-champions of the Ivy League with 2 conference losses since 1982, since the first term of the Ronald Reagan administration. So this is just something I'm rooting for. Nothing against Harvard, but I want to see this. I want to see Yale take out Harvard. To have this happen, because it's just rare. I mean, obviously it's rare to have a 2-loss Ivy League champion. The quarterback matchup is amazing no matter who comes out on the field for Harvard, because Charles DePrima was honestly one of the most electric quarterbacks in the country. Outdueled Matthew Sluka, beat Matthew Sluka in his own game as a runner. But DePrima had 518 rushing yards with 84 carries, and that's including sacks. 6 yards a carry, including sacks. He got hurt, so Jaden Craig took over, and Jaden Craig, I mean, their running styles are different. Craig is 30 pounds heavier than DePrima. Craig has significantly less yards per carry, but he has 142 rushing yards in his 2 starts. Nolan Grooms, not to be outdone, has 20 passing touchdowns and 576 rush yards for Yale, where he's quietly had. I think he's quietly had a strong year. You can say it's quietly because DePrima and Harvard have stolen most of the headlines, with them being 8-1, with them beating Holy Cross early in the season. But DePrima slash Craig versus Grooms, noon on ESPNU. I mean, you can't ask for more than that for the Ivy League. I mean, it's the game. Harvard versus Yale. There's kind of a reverence that follows the game. I mean, when you really think about it, like there's like this respect where it's like, uh, these two have been rivals since the 1870s. These two have helped the game develop into what it is today. So definitely a game that's worth a screen for those of you that have multi-screen setups.
Who are you trying to throw shade at there, Omar?
Oh, I'm not throwing shade at anyone. I'm just saying there's just yeah, it's like I just get kind of like chills just like thinking about, Harvard Yale.
Yeah, no, it'll be and there's no more in a day and age where in big name college football, the regular season has never been less important. Just because for a long time it was everything. And then now as we have the playoff, it's possible to drop a game and still make it in. That is not true for the Ivy League. Your regular season is your entire season. There are no postseason hopes, and there's a lot out of your control, like how everyone else performs. And so a two-loss champion would be rare, but a co-champion would be even more rare. So that's I think we don't root for teams, we root for chaos though, right? So at least well, I root for teams at least. But for my last game of the week to watch, Boise State at Utah State, just because the winner is bowl eligible. Boise State coming off of an eventful Sunday where they fired Andy Avalos after a 22-14 career record. You hate to see a coach be fired as his alma mater anytime, but especially like almost mid-season and not after an abysmal showing necessarily. So Utah State also, they may be the best 5-5 team in the country. They have a top 20 scoring offense. They have top 40 passing and rushing offenses. The defense is the category that lacks the most, but they are ranked 42nd in red zone defense. So very bend, don't break. Last week, also maybe one of the most fun stories, Seni Tuiaki, the thick six last week for Utah State. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It was very fun to watch. So
Yeah, so I mean, Utah State, Boise State, that's somewhat of a rivalry for sure. I know Logan's only a few hours away from Boise State, but I mean, if you look at that game, like Boise State has always kind of been the game that Utah State can't really break the get over the hump on. 2021 when Utah State won the Mountain West, I mean, they lost to Boise State at home in Logan in a game that was on CBS, a big noon kickoff on CBS that was at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, which I don't envy the fans out there at Maverick Stadium in Logan that day. So this is definitely, this is a game that Utah State fans, will get up for. And I think the turnover and the turmoil with the Broncos will, kind of, I mean, that it may throw an added factor in that one for sure. So definitely one to watch. I mean, with some mid-tier bowl implications where like either of these teams could probably appear in the Hawaii Bowl, I think, or the Potato Bowl, where it just depends. It depends, I guess, which team. I guess whichever team wins this one gets sent to the Hawaii Bowl, in my opinion, because I would think that the conference would want to send the better team to Hawaii as opposed to having them play a MAC school in Boise. Um, Hawaii to play an American Conference team, I should say. So I just want to showcase the Celebration Bowl race because this is probably the most electric it's been in years. We have the scenarios. We have Howard is winning in. They play Morgan State. They win. They're in. Morgan State, though, although they're 5-5, and this is a team, honestly, like, let's get Damon Wilson some Coach of the Year honors, to be honest with you, out there in Baltimore. I know Neil or for Neil Boudreau is gonna like us saying that, but this team has they have competed with the best teams in the country. They almost beat Oregon. I mean, they almost beat not Oregon. They almost beat Akron. Almost beat Akron on the road. They lost by 3 to the Zips. They almost beat UAlbany, a team that is likely that we, as I mentioned earlier, is likely set to win the CAA or a share of the CAA. They beat Richmond, a team that's on the bubble right now, the playoff, and is 7-3, could end the season 8-3. This is just, I mean, Morgan State's, they got next for, as the quarterbacks graduate for Howard, as Quinn William graduates, as Davis Richard graduates. I mean, it's hard not to say that Morgan State, with their strong defense and with more experienced quarterback play, as they're going through some growing pains at quarterback with a few of their quarterbacks, but I think they've played it looks like 4 quarterbacks this year. They get a more consistent quarterback play. This team looks like a favorite out of the MEAC. So just to recap so far, Howard's winning in. Morgan State has a chance at the Celebration Bowl if they beat Howard, and if the fight in Delaware State Hornets at 1-8, or I think at 1-9 actually, upset the North Carolina Central Eagles, which not likely to happen, but I mean North Carolina Central needs to win and they need Howard to lose. So those are the scenarios that exist for the road to Atlanta. Definitely exciting. And we showcased the Patriot League race last week. I mean, right now as it stands, it's Lehigh can spoil Lafayette's season. And if Holy Cross beats Georgetown, which that game is no walk in the park like in past years. If Georgetown beats Holy Cross, or sorry, yeah, Georgetown beats Holy Cross, or if Holy Cross beats Georgetown, then they will be in the playoffs with a Lehigh win over Lafayette. So a lot of playoff races too, that I just didn't go into as much detail, but just a fun weekend. I mean, I'm really excited.
Absolutely. No, there's a lot of great football to watch. The great thing about this being the last week of FCS football is, like I said, it's not the deepest slate for the FBS. And so whenever there's a weak slate or there's not really much going on, just pull up ESPN Plus, man. I promise you, there's a ton of games that are going to be fun to watch. And at least even if they aren't as competitive, they're definitely higher stakes. So
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like you said, I mean, these games are easy to find if you have ESPN Plus. I mean, ESPN Plus is a great value. Is a great value added. But yeah, I mean, that's all I have. Just a great
yeah.
weekend of FCS football. Do you have anything else, Jackson?
That's it for me. Just excited for another great week of football.
All right. I mean, that being said, until next time, everyone, stay safe and peace, love, and soul.